Hello and welcome. Today we're digging into a huge state election result that actually tells us a much bigger story about India's entire political landscape. It's a story of powerful, unlikely alliances, a really struggling opposition, and a question that keeps popping up throughout history. Can the country's oldest party actually survive its own internal drama?
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We're going to kick things off with the big headline, that massive election verdict in Bihar. Then we'll zoom in on the two leaders who pulled off this win. After that, we'll look at why their opponents, the Grand Alliance, just completely fell apart. And that leads us right to the heart of our story today, the massive crisis inside the Congress Party. We'll even take a trip back in time to check out its long history of dramatic splits, before we ask the big question, why, this time around, things might be totally different. All right, first up, the election result that has had everybody talking. What happened in the state of Bihar was, and I'm not exaggerating here, nothing short of a political earthquake.
Okay, so the numbers you're seeing here, they tell a pretty dramatic story. In the Bihar Assembly, you need 122 seats to win a majority. The ruling NDA alliance, which is led by Prime Minister Modi's BJP, well, they didn't just cross that line, they absolutely smashed it, winning around 200 seats. And in contrast, the opposition's Grand Alliance, or Mahagathbandhan, they barely got 40. I mean, this was not a close race. This was a historic, total landslide.
So you might be asking, why does one state election matter so much? Well, first off, Bihar is massive. We're talking about India's third biggest state by population, 130 million people, and it sends 40 lawmakers to the national parliament, so it has a lot of clout. This win was also a huge morale boost for the BJP, kind of turning their luck around after some recent losses. And maybe most importantly, with 40% of its people under the age of 18, Bihar is incredibly young. The saying goes, if India is going to grow, Bihar has to grow.
So who were the masterminds behind this incredible win? Well, it's really the story of two political veterans who, let's be honest, have some major differences, but they still managed to create this unbeaten alliance, Narendra Modi and Nitish Kumar.
Just look at how their careers moved almost in perfect parallel. They were born just 6 months apart, and both really got into politics in their early 20s, but they were on totally opposite sides of the fence. While Modi was dedicating his life to the Hindu nationalist RSS, Nitish was a big name in the socialist JP student movement, which was often fighting against everything the RSS stood for. So for decades, their careers just ran side by side, one rising in Gujarat, the other in Bihar, before they both reached the absolute peak of power.
And you really can't overstate how different their core beliefs are. Modi's entire career is built on the Hindutva ideology of the RSS and the BJP. Nitish Kumar, on the other hand, well, his whole political base was built on secularism and socialist ideas, often standing in direct opposition to the very forces that Modi represents.
And to really get how wild this alliance is, you just have to hear this. This is a quote from Nitish Kumar talking in the past about the very same party he's now allied with. "I'd rather die than go with them." It just shows you how deep the bad blood was and how, modern Indian politics can be incredibly pragmatic, or some might say opportunistic.
And then on the other side, you've got Prime Minister Modi's very carefully built public image. He often presents himself as a fakir, an ascetic who isn't attached to power. He famously said he could just pick up his bag and leave. It's a really powerful image, and it stands in pretty sharp contrast to all the deal-making and backroom politics of alliances.
Okay, so how did this totally unlikely duo pull off such a humongous win? Well, if you talk to analysts, they point to three main things. First, huge support from women voters. Female turnout shot up to 71%, way higher than the men, and a government cash transfer program for women probably had a lot to do with it. Second, the NDA alliance itself just worked like a well-oiled machine. And third, well, they were up against a pretty weak and disorganized opposition.
And that brings us to the other side of the coin. Because to really understand the victory, you have to understand the defeat. Why did the opposition's Grand Alliance just fail so badly? Here's the thing. They were basically battling their own history. The main regional party in their alliance was haunted by this old reputation for really bad governance, which people still called Jungle Raj or jungle rule. But beyond that, there was just this total disconnect. While the leaders were focusing on big-picture issues like election integrity, the actual voters on the ground were way more worried about jobs, safety, and local caste politics. The message just wasn't hitting home.
Now, the absolute weakest link in that whole alliance was the Indian National Congress. Its terrible performance in Bihar has kicked off this huge, fierce debate inside the party, and it's brought them to a major crossroads. And it's raising a very old, very dramatic question.
So here it is.
Can the Congress party split? Again? Seriously, this is the question being whispered in political circles all across India. After yet another bad election, the frustration inside the party is boiling over, and a lot of people are seriously wondering if it can even hold itself together anymore.
And to get why this question is so powerful, we have to look back in time. Because for the Congress Party, splitting up isn't some new thing. It's practically baked into its DNA. Get this, the party has been through roughly 70 splits in its long history. 70. That is just a mind-blowing number, and it tells you just how messy its past has been. But out of all those splits, there are two that really stand out. And the two big ones were both masterminded by one person, Indira Gandhi. Back in '69, she was basically kicked out by a group of powerful old-school leaders. So what did she do? She just went and started her own version of the party, called it Congress R, and then stormed back to win a gigantic victory. And then, after the super controversial emergency period in 1978, guess what? It happened again. Another split, with Indira right at the center of it. And that group that challenged her back in '69, they were known as the Congress Syndicate. You can think of them as the old guard, the political bosses who thought they could control her. Spoiler alert, they were wrong. Her rebellion and her massive win completely remade the party in her own image.
And here's a brilliant little piece of history that shows the legacy of all this infighting. Even the party's famous symbol, the hand or panja, was born directly from one of these splits. After she was kicked out, Indira Gandhi lost the party's old symbol, so the election commission gave her new options, like an elephant or a cycle. She chose the hand, and that symbol has been the face of the party ever since. Crazy, right?
So with all this history of rebellion and splitting up, why are so many people today saying a major split probably isn't going to happen? Okay, let's bring it back to the present day and figure out why this time things really do seem different.
First, we got to be clear on the difference between a split and an exodus. A split is what Indira Gandhi did, where a huge chunk of the party breaks off and claims to be the real Congress. An exodus, which is what's happening now, is when individual leaders just get fed up and leave, one by one, to go join other parties.
So why isn't a real split likely? Well, the biggest reason is pretty simple. There is no Indira Gandhi today. There isn't a single challenger who's famous and powerful enough to break the party in two and take a huge piece with them. For decades, power has been so centralized with the Gandhi family that no other real power centers have been able to grow. So for leaders who are unhappy, it's just way easier to pack their bags and leave than to try and fight a battle they know they'll probably lose. And honestly, there's just this feeling of tiredness, a let-it-be attitude that stops any real rebellion from ever getting off the ground.
And all of this leaves us with one final and really important question for the future. If the main opposition party is just stuck in this state, unable to win elections, but also unable to split up or really change itself, what does that actually mean for political competition in the world's largest democracy? It's a question that goes way beyond just one election. It goes right to the heart of India's political future.